P-47, The Birth of a Giant, Part 1, Cinematic Narration Style. April 8, 1943. 27,000 feet above Caen, France. The thin air crackled with tension. Through the curved glass of his Focke-Wulf 190A5, Oberleutnant Rolf Hermachen smiled beneath his oxygen mask. Below him, climbing slowly through the crystal sky, were the awkward silhouettes of strange new fighters, the Americans, making their combat debut over occupied Europe. "The Jai armies have sent us flying milk bottles," he joked to his wingman. Laughter filled the radio. To the German veterans of Jagdgeschwader 26, the sight was comical. 16 bulky aircraft, their engines straining as they clawed toward altitude. Republic P-47 Thunderbolts, enormous, ungainly, and nothing like the sleek, deadly machines the Luftwaffe knew so well. To German eyes, they looked absurd. Barrel-shaped fuselages, stubby wings, and propellers so large they seemed out of proportion. But that morning, as the Luftwaffe aces circled like wolves, they were watching something far greater than they could imagine. The arrival of a weapon that would change the air war forever. Within 18 months, the flying milk bottle would evolve from a joke into a nightmare. Its 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns becoming the most feared sound in German skies. Major Donald Blakesley, commander of the 335th Fighter Squadron, led the formation that day. A former RAF Spitfire pilot and veteran of the Eagle squadrons, Blakesley knew what his men did not yet understand. Surviving in a P-47 would require unlearning everything they thought they knew about air combat. The Thunderbolt was not built for elegance, it was built for domination. While the Germans pursued light, nimble interceptors optimized for turn and climb, Republic Aviation had created something new. A high-altitude juggernaut powered by brute force. It would fight not with agility, but with speed, mass, and overwhelming firepower. Among the 56 American pilots spread across the French sky that morning were names that would later become legends. But on that day, April 8, 1943, they were rookies, facing the most experienced fighter force on Earth. The Luftwaffe had been fighting since 1939. These Americans had never seen combat. This is the story of how industrial power defeated tactical brilliance, how laughter turned to fear, and how the logic of mass production reshaped the skies of Europe. The Thunderbolt's origins began in panic. In June 1940, as German fighters swept across France, Republic Aviation's chief designer, Alexander Kartvili, received urgent orders from the U.S. Army Air Corps. Build a high-altitude interceptor capable of matching Germany's best. Kartvili's response was radical. "It will be a dinosaur," he admitted, "but a dinosaur with good proportions." When the prototype XP-47B first flew on May 6, 1941, it stunned onlookers. At nearly 10,000 pounds empty, it was 65% heavier than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer. Its enormous turbo supercharger, mounted in the rear fuselage, gave it a swollen look, but the performance was breathtaking. Pilots asked, "Does this thing even fly?" It did more than fly. It roared. At 27,000 feet, where German engines gasped for oxygen, the Thunderbolt's Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp still delivered full power. Exhaust-driven turbo supercharging meant it could fight where others faltered. But power came at a price. Between September 1942 and January 1943, Major Hubert Hub Zemke's 56th Fighter Group lost 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in training. The Thunderbolt was dangerous to the untrained, prone to torque rolls, high-speed dives, and lethal compressibility stalls. It killed more Americans in training than Germans would in early combat. Yet those who mastered it discovered something extraordinary. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma, would later call it like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was overwhelming. He said, "You didn't fly it, you aimed it." The first combats in April and May 1943 confirmed German arrogance. P-47s couldn't outturn a Focke-Wulf 190. They couldn't climb with a Messerschmitt 109. Luftwaffe pilots dismissed them as slow, heavy, and clumsy. Joseph Pips Priller, commander of JG-26, laughed after his first encounter. The new American fighter flies like a truck and climbs like a pregnant cow. Indeed, in their first month, the Thunderbolts lost 14 aircraft for only 3 confirmed kills. Even the RAF mocked them. But something was happening that no one noticed. The P-47s that fell took incredible punishment before dying. And many didn't die at all. One returned with 21 cannon holes and more than 100 bullet strikes, damage that would have obliterated a Spitfire or Messerschmitt. The big radial engine, with no fragile coolant system, shrugged off hits that would stop a liquid-cooled fighter cold. And when a P-47 did get its guns on target, the results were devastating. 8 Browning machine guns firing together created a storm of metal. 3,400 rounds of ammunition, 6,000 bullets per minute. Enough to tear a fighter in half in seconds. The mathematics of destruction was already written into its wings. The turning point came on June 26, 1943, over Le Touquet, France. Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron was flying escort when his formation was ambushed by 16 Focke-Wulf 190s led by Wilhelm Ferdinand Golland, brother of the famous Adolf Golland. Johnson's P-47 was hit immediately. 20 20mm cannon shells exploded across his aircraft. The canopy shattered, oil sprayed over the cockpit, the engine cowling ripped away. Wounded and blinded, he tried to bail out, but the canopy was jammed. He was trapped in a dying airplane. Somehow, the crippled Thunderbolt kept flying. Johnson leveled out, heading for England. Then, a lone Focke-Wulf 190 appeared behind him. The German pilot opened fire, cannon, then machine guns, riddling the Thunderbolt with over 200 hits. Still, it flew. Finally, the enemy pilot pulled alongside, staring in disbelief. Then, slowly, he raised his hand and saluted, before turning away, out of ammunition. Johnson landed at Manston. His crew stopped counting bullet holes after reaching 200. The Thunderbolt had survived the impossible. That day, the laughter stopped.
The summer of 1943 marked the beginning of a transformation. The Thunderbolt was no longer a curiosity. It was a growing storm. Under the leadership of Hub Zemke, the 56th Fighter Group began rewriting the rulebook for air combat. Zemke understood the truth. The P-47 was not a knife for dogfights. It was a hammer. He trained his men to fight with energy, not agility. Dive to gain speed. Attack from above. Fire once, then climb away. Never turn with a Messerschmitt. Never fight on the enemy's terms. The Germans soon learned that if a P-47 was above them, it was already too late. At 30,000 feet, the turbo-supercharged Pratt & Whitney R-2800 could push the Thunderbolt past 440 miles per hour in a dive, faster than anything the Luftwaffe had. The massive frame that once seemed clumsy became a weapon of kinetic dominance. By late 1943, Zemke's Wolfpack, as the 56th became known, had turned the tide. Their kill ratios soared. They began to rule the altitudes once owned by the Luftwaffe. And when the P-47D arrived with drop tanks extending its range, the German pilots realized a grim truth. There was nowhere left to hide. Autumn, 1943. In the skies over Bremen, the Thunderbolts met the enemy in force. The Luftwaffe's seasoned aces, men like Walter Dahl and Egon Mayer, found themselves fighting opponents who no longer played by familiar rules. The Americans came in disciplined formations, hitting from above in perfectly timed attacks, each flight covering the next. Their radios hummed with cold precision. One German pilot wrote in his diary, "The Thunderbolt dives like the wrath of God. You see it for a second, then you are dead. That winter, the Allied bombing campaign intensified. The P-47 became the guardian of the heavy bombers, the flying fortresses that pounded Germany's war industry. At first, the fighters could only escort them halfway. Beyond that, the bombers were slaughtered. But the Thunderbolt's range grew with every improvement. New tanks, new tactics, new willpower. Then, in early 1944, a new challenger arrived, the North American P-51 Mustang. Sleek, long-legged, and elegant, the Mustang could reach Berlin and back. Many thought the Thunderbolt's reign was ending. It wasn't. While the Mustangs took over long-range escort, the Thunderbolts turned their fury toward the ground. By D-Day, the Thunderbolt had become a terror on the battlefield. Armed with bombs, rockets, and those 8 heavy machine guns, it could obliterate trains, convoys, tanks, anything that moved. The Germans gave it a new name, Jabo, short for Jagdbomber. Others called it the Jug, a name that fit perfectly. The Jug dove out of the sun, unleashing destruction with industrial precision. Bridges vanished, columns of armor burned, railway yards erupted into chaos. In Normandy, as Allied forces fought to break out of the beaches, Thunderbolts roared overhead from dawn to dusk. Pilots flew 4, 5 missions a day, hunting anything that fueled the German war machine. The Luftwaffe was crumbling, its veterans gone, its new pilots barely trained. The sky belonged to the Americans now. By late 1944, the Thunderbolt squadrons had destroyed tens of thousands of vehicles and hundreds of locomotives. Entire divisions were immobilized under the relentless rain of 50 caliber fire. The P-47 had become more than a fighter. It was a flying symbol of American industry, brutal, loud, and unstoppable. Robert Johnson, Zemke, Gabreski, the aces of thunder. From the chaos rose legends. Robert Johnson survived 91 missions and scored 27 victories. Hub Zemke, the tactician, led his group to 665 confirmed kills. And then came Francis Gabby Gabreski, whose 28 aerial victories made him America's top ace in the European theater. When Gabreski was finally shot down in July 1944, after strafing a German airfield, he survived months as a prisoner of war. His name had already become legend. These men embodied what the Thunderbolt stood for: resilience, endurance, and relentless aggression. The last winter. By 1945, the P-47 had evolved into the D-25 and M variants, faster, tougher, and deadlier. In the Ardennes, during the Battle of the Bulge, Thunderbolts became the fire brigade of the skies. When German tanks broke through the Allied lines, the Jugs were called in. They came in pairs and squadrons, dropping 500-pound bombs and firing rockets that shattered entire panzer formations. The Luftwaffe could do nothing. General Eisenhower himself later said, "The effectiveness of the Thunderbolt in destroying German supplies and communications was beyond calculation." By the war's end, the statistics told the story. Over 15,600 Thunderbolts built, more than 3,700 enemy aircraft destroyed in the air, tens of thousands of armored vehicles, locomotives, and troops destroyed on the ground. It was the most produced American fighter of the war, and though it never had the elegance of the Mustang, it was the one the ground troops loved most, the one they could hear screaming down to save them. After the fire. When peace came, the P-47 faded quietly from frontline service. The world had changed. Jet engines had arrived. But for those who had flown it, the memory never dimmed. The Thunderbolt had saved bombers, crushed armies, and endured punishment no other aircraft could survive. As one pilot wrote later, "It wasn't graceful, it wasn't subtle, but when you were in trouble, The Jug was the friend that always came back. Epilogue. From mockery to mastery, the P-47's journey mirrored the industrial spirit of its creators, practical, powerful, unyielding. When the Luftwaffe first saw it, they laughed. By 1945, the laughter was gone, replaced by silence over ruined airfields and burning trains. The Jug had done its work. The skies of Europe were free.